I never imagined I'd be that guy. You know, the one that posts his heartfelt feelings about his unfaithful wife online. But here I am, broken and desperate. My entire world turned upside down. It all began with a gut punch on our 10th anniversary, when I discovered my wife, Mehgan, in a compromising situation with a guy at her company. And if that wasn't enough, my marriage and my desire of having a home, for which I've been working 2 jobs, have both failed miserably. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let us take it one painstaking step at a time. So there I was, thinking I had everything worked out. I'm Jake, a 35-year-old construction worker married to Mehgan, the most beautiful lady I've ever seen. We married 10 years ago, and it's been a wild ride. Mehgan's been killing it at work recently, working on a major project that might make or destroy her career. She's been working insane hours for the past 3 months, staying late, going in early, and so on, all to achieve this ridiculous deadline. I got it. We both pledged to support one another's dreams, right? Meanwhile, I've been working quite hard in construction. Our hours have been erratic due to the rain. Some days, I work 12-hour shifts to make up for lost time. Other days, I wake up to the sound of rain pelting the glass and know I'm not going inside. On those days, I normally go to the gym for a few hours. I should stay in shape for my blazing, sexy wife, right? Thursday began like every other day. I was up at the crack of dawn and on site by 6 a.m. However, by mid-morning, the heavens opened up and it began to pour. The boss sent us home because it was too risky to work under those conditions. So I did what I normally do, went to the gym. But this is when things took a turn. I cut my workout short, thinking, hey, why not surprise Mehgan? It was our anniversary, after all. We hadn't seen much of one another that week, as we were each preoccupied with our own lives. I planned to stop by her office and maybe take her out for a quick lunch if she had the time. I stopped at this small flower shop on the way. I picked her a bouquet of her favorite flowers, sunflowers, and daisies. Simple, but they always make her happy. I must admit, I was feeling quite good about myself, imagining the expression on her face when I went in with flowers in hand. Was I in for a surprise? I walked inside her office building around 12:30. Nicole, the receptionist, was in her normal spot. Sweet girl, you always have a smile for me. I apologized for being late and requested her to place the flowers on Mehgan's desk. But Nicole, bless her heart, replied, I don't think they went to lunch yet. Why don't you drop them off yourself? She buzzed me through and I returned to the offices. The place resembled a ghost town. Everyone must have gone out for lunch or something. I made my way to Mehgan's office and found the door was closed. Normally, I would just stroll in unless Nicole informed me that Mehgan was in a meeting. So that is what I did. And that's when my entire universe came crashing down. There was Mehgan, my wife, the lady I'd loved for 10 years, with a guy standing behind her and nuzzling her neck. She was reaching back over his head, giggling in a way that made my heart skip a beat. I heard her say, "We've got to get this done." I felt as if I had been caught off guard. When the air left my lungs, I was unable to move for a brief while. Then something inside me snapped. I slammed the flowers down on her desk, choked out, "Happy anniversary," and went away. I can't remember what happened next. I dimly remember passing Nicole and mumbling adieu. I got to the elevators and out of the building before my phone blew up. I didn't respond. Couldn't respond. What was I supposed to say? The drive home was a haze. I know I sobbed, bawled my eyes out, to be honest. I, a grown man, sobbed like a child who had spilled his ice cream. But damn it, it hurt. It still hurts. When I came home, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. I felt like the walls were closing in around me. So I did what any normal person would do. I ran. I drove, actually. I pulled my camping stuff from the garage rafters and took off. I ended up at a state campground about 2 hours away. Mehgan and I have been there before. It's funny how, even when you're trying to run away, you wind up somewhere that reminds you of the person you're fleeing from. I hiked the trail we had previously completed together. It's about a 3-hour hike, and every step seemed like I was walking through quicksand. My thoughts were racing, repeating the incident in her office over and over, attempting to make sense of it all. You know what is crazy? I'm honestly glad I was in such a rush to go. Usually when I go camping, I bring my 45. We have black bears around here, and while they usually drive people away, they can become aggressive if they are hungry or have babies nearby. But, given my current situation, let's just say I was inclined to use it on myself. My phone kept buzzing the entire time. Mehgan was phoning, messaging, and presumably leaving voicemails that I couldn't bring myself to listen to. I eventually turned the darn thing off. I could not deal with it. Did not want to deal with it. As the sun began to drop, I found myself sitting by the lake and staring at the water, trying to figure out where everything went wrong. How did we arrive here? What did I miss? That's when I started thinking back to the start of our story, trying to see if there were any red signs I'd missed. Were there any indications that this was coming? However, the more I thought about it, the more puzzled I became. See, Mehgan and I are from completely different worlds. My mother and grandfather reared me. We didn't have much, but they worked hard to make sure my brother and I never felt left out. Grandpa was full of wisdom and had a saying for everything. He said marriage would be the most difficult job I'd ever have, and I'd have to work on it every day. I wish he were still around. I could use his guidance right now. In contrast, Mehgan was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. Not filthy rich, but very comfortable. Excellent college, good clothing, new car, the works. And beautiful? Christ, she's an 11 out of 10. I used to joke with her about the silver spoon getting caught in her throat when she coughed. When we initially met, I couldn't imagine a woman like her would even consider me. We dated for a time before she revealed her history. Our friends used to refer to us as the model couple because they assumed we were both so attractive that we must be models. However, our relatives were not as happy. They were concerned about economic disparities coming into play. As I sat by the lake, watching the sun set behind the trees, I couldn't help but wonder whether this was inevitable. Were we doomed from the outset due to our diverse backgrounds? Or was there something more that I had overlooked along the way? I did not have any answers, just a lot of questions and a heart that felt like it had been through a meat grinder. As the darkness fell around me, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Looking back, I think the signals were there. I really didn't want to see them. Perhaps I was too preoccupied with my own thoughts to notice. In any case, the flaws in our idyllic existence began to emerge some time ago. It all began around 4 months ago. Mehgan landed this massive project at work. Career-defining stuff, she stated. I was overjoyed for her, genuinely. She had worked her tail off to reach where she was, and I wanted to support her dreams in the same way she had always supported mine. But wow, the hours she began working, it was as if she had become a ghost in our home. She'd go before I awoke and return late at night. At first, I didn't think much about it. Big project, big commitment, correct? That is what I kept telling myself. Then the small things started stacking up. She would forget our date nights. Her phone would buzz at random hours and she'd grab it like it was on fire. When I asked who it was, she'd mumble something about work before changing the conversation. I recall this one night around 2 months ago. I got home early and planned to surprise her with dinner. I'd prepared her favorite Thai meal, set the table, and lit some candles. If I may say so, it is quite romantic. 9 p.m. rolled around. No Mehgan. 10 p.m. There's still no trace of her. By 11, I had given up and was about to go to bed when she stumbled through the door. She smelled of alcohol and... Was that cologne? Not mine, for sure. Late night at the office? I asked, attempting to maintain a neutral tone. She jumped as if she saw a ghost. Jake, yes. We made a significant progress on the project and decided to celebrate. I wanted to believe her. God, I really wanted to believe her. But something in my stomach told me there was more to this story. The next morning I saw a hickey on her neck. When I mentioned it, she shrugged it off. She said she must have burned herself with her curling iron. Since when has Mehgan used a curling iron? After that, I began to pay closer attention. I am noticing things that I had previously neglected. For example, she would always position herself away from me while texting, or how she'd suddenly found an interest in yoga, but never appeared to bring home any workout gear. One Saturday, I decided to visit her office. I figured I'd catch her in the middle of her major endeavor, which she was constantly talking about. But when I arrived, the facility was completely shut up. There are no automobiles in the parking lot, and no lights are on inside. Where in the hell was she? When she got home that night, I casually asked how work was going. She went into a lengthy, detailed account about spreadsheets and client meetings. I nodded, my mind racing. Was she lying to me? Had she been lying the entire time? I began doing things I never imagined I would do. She was checking her phone while taking a shower, looking for anything in her drawers. I don't know what. Evidence, I suppose. I was unsure of what. One night, I discovered a receipt folded up in her purse. It was for a hotel room and dated 2 weeks before, on Tuesday. She informed me she was working late. My heart fell. This was it, right? The smoking gun. Despite the mounting evidence, I could not bring myself to confront her. What if I'm wrong? What if there was a totally harmless explanation for everything? So I stayed quiet. I kept watching. I kept noticing the tiny things that didn't add up. For example, she had suddenly become concerned with her physical beauty. New clothing, new hairstyle, and I started wearing makeup to work. Mehgan had always been beautiful, but now she seemed to be attempting to impress someone who was not me. Or how she became strangely protective of her laptop. She used to leave it open on the kitchen counter with no care in the world. Now, that item was password locked and she'd snap it shut anytime I entered the room. Then there were those strange business excursions. She seemed to be leaving every other week for a conference or a client appointment. Always at the last minute, always absolutely crucial to the project. I recall one night, approximately a month ago, she was packing for one of these excursions, and I noticed she was carrying this slinky little black outfit. Not exactly normal office clothing, if you get what I mean. "What's that for?" I inquired, attempting to keep my tone casual. She hardly looked up. "Oh, you understand. In case we need to entertain clients." Right. Because nothing says professional like a dress that barely conceals your ass. I wanted to say something. I wanted to seize her by the shoulders and shake her, demanding the truth, but I did not. I just stood there, watching her pack, feeling like an outsider in my own house. What is the worst part? The absolute worst aspect was how she behaved when she returned from these vacations. All lovey-dovey, as if we were newlyweds again. She would want to have sex all the time and be really affectionate, and I'd go along with it while loathing myself the entire time. I wondered if she was thinking of him when we were together. God, the mind games. I was playing with myself. One minute, I'd be convinced she was cheating. The next thing I knew, I was convincing myself not to do it, making justifications for her behavior. She's only worried about work. She is experiencing some sort of midlife crisis. It isn't what you think, Jake. It cannot be. But deep down, I knew. I believe I had known for a long. I just wasn't prepared to face it. Then came the fateful Thursday, our anniversary. The day everything collapsed around me. I awoke that morning feeling, I do not know. I suppose I am hopeful. Perhaps today will be different. Maybe today she'll remember what's important. Remember us. However, when I moved over, her side of the bed was vacant, cold. She had already left for work. Did not even leave a note. That should have been my first clue. But, like an idiot, I continued to hold out hope. I still believed I could save this train disaster of a marriage. If only I had known what was waiting for me at her office. If only I had listened to the little voice in my head that warned me something was amiss. Maybe I could have prepared myself for the upcoming gut punch, but I did not. I strolled right in, flowers in hand, heart on sleeve. And now? Now I'm sitting in the middle of nowhere, trying to figure out where everything went wrong. One thing is certain, however. Things will never be the same again, and I can only blame myself for not recognizing what was right in front of me all along. Do you remember that scene in the movies where everything goes into slow motion? That is exactly how I felt when I entered Mehgan's office. The world around me appeared to come to a halt, and all I could concentrate on was the scene in front of me. There she was, my wife of 10 years, giggling like a schoolgirl as some guy nuzzled her neck. His hands were... God, I feel nauseous just thinking about it. And the expression on her face? pure joy, as if she had forgotten I even existed. For a single second, I wondered whether I was hallucinating. Perhaps the tension had finally gotten to me, and I was experiencing some sort of mental collapse. But nah, this was real. All too real. I'm not sure how long I remained there, transfixed at the doorway. It seemed like hours, although it was really just a few seconds. Then, something within me snapped. I slapped the flowers on her desk, those idiotic bright sunflowers that now appeared to be taunting me, and choked out, "Happy anniversary." The expression on Mehgan's face as she realized I was present, I'll never forget this. Shock, guilt, and finally frustration, which really got to me, as if I had interrupted something vital, something that was more important than our marriage, our vows, our entire lives together. I didn't hang around to hear her justifications. Couldn't bear it. I just turned and walked out, disregarding her calls behind me. Made it to the elevator before the tears began. I was a mess when I arrived to my pickup. Sobbing like a child, snot pouring down my cheeks, the entire 9 yards. I drove home in a haze, barely seeing the road ahead of me. My phone was buzzing, no doubt from Mehgan trying to undertake damage control. I switched the blasted thing off. I could not deal with it. Did not want to deal with it. When I went home, I felt suffocated. The walls seemed to be closing in on me, with every inch of the house a reminder of the life we had created together. Her life had just shattered into a million pieces. That was when I decided to run. I'll admit, it wasn't my proudest moment, but I couldn't think clearly, couldn't breathe. I realized I needed to get out of there. I got my camping gear from the garage and set off. We ended up at a state campground a few hours away. Ironically, Mehgan and I had already visited this location. Even if you try to go away, you can't really escape your memories. I hiked for hours, pushing myself to exhaustion. Anything to calm the noises within my head, the questions, the doubts. How long was this going on? Was it a one-time incident, or had she been lying to me for months? What about years? As the sun began to fall, I picked a location near the lake and just sat down, staring at the sea, trying to make sense of everything. That's when the memories came pouring back. All the little things I had noticed but ignored over the last few months. Late evenings at work, sudden business trips. She'd guard her phone as if it contained national secrets. God, I'd been such an idiot. The symptoms were as apparent as day. I had just not wanted to see them. I reflected on the early days of our relationship, how we would overcome our diverse origins and prove everyone incorrect who thought we wouldn't last. We'd been so in love, so confident in our future together. Whatever happened to that couple? When did we become this? As night fell, I pitched my tent and crawled inside. We did not bother with a fire or food. I wasn't hungry anyway, just laid there staring at the tent ceiling, replaying the incident in her office over and over in my head. I must have drifted off at some point, because it was already dawn when I realized it. For a beautiful moment, I forgot where I was and why. Then everything came crashing down, and the pain hit me like a freight train. I checked my phone. Mehgan missed 27 calls, 42 SMS messages. I could not bring myself to read them. What could she say to make this okay? That was when I received a call from my friend Tom. Mehgan had called him, panicked, to see whether he had heard from me. I wanted to be sure I hadn't done anything stupid. I talked to Tom for a while, explaining the essentials of what had happened. He was stunned, to say the least. He kept saying he couldn't believe it, that Mehgan and I were the perfect couple. Yes, right, perfect my ass. Tom asked me to come over, saying I shouldn't be alone right now. But I wasn't prepared to face anyone yet. I told him I needed time to contemplate and comprehend things. He understood, but made me pledge to check in on a frequent basis. Tom is a good man, always looking out for me. After I hung up, I sat down for a long time simply thinking, trying to determine where we went wrong. Was this my fault? Had I not paid attention enough? Is not romantic enough? Or was it only her? Had she simply become tired with our life together and decided to seek stimulation elsewhere? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just Mehgan, but also myself, for being so blind, for fully trusting her, for believing that we had something exceptional and indestructible. By midday, I'd worked myself up to a serious state. I decided I needed to face her and seek some answers. I packed up my belongings and drove home, practicing what I was going to say the entire way. But when I arrived, the house was deserted. Mehgan's automobile was gone. For a brief while, terror set in. Had she abandoned me? Taken off with the guy from her office? Then I noticed the message on the kitchen countertop. "Jake, I'm deeply sorry. Please call me when you're ready to discuss. I love you. M." Love me? Was she kidding? If she loved me, she would not have... I couldn't bring myself to complete the notion. Instead, I did something I am not proud of. I started going through her belongings. I'm looking for evidence, I suppose. Proof that this wasn't a one-time occurrence, and that she had been lying to me for who knows how long. I discovered it in her nightstand. A burner phone is hidden inside some papers. My hands shook as I turned it on. There were hundreds of messages, all addressed to and from the same number. I didn't identify it, but I had a good idea who it belonged to. I began reading, each message like a knife in the gut. They had been doing this for months, planning meetups, emailing each other sexy photographs, and discussing the future together. There were even communications from that morning, after she was apprehended. She apologized for the situation, but stated that she did not regret their time together. That's when something in me snapped. All the hurt and confusion turned to wrath. I wanted to break something. I wanted to hurt her in the same manner she had damaged me. Instead, I took up the phone and called her. It was time for answers. It's time to accept the harsh reality, no matter how much it hurt. As the phone rang, I braced myself for what was coming. Things were about to change, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be pretty. The phone rang once, twice, then 3 times. Each ring felt like an eternity. On the 4th ring, she responded, "Jake?" Her voice was soft and tentative, as if she was terrified of what I would say. Good. She should be terrified. "We need to talk," I said softly, attempting to remain cool. "Now." She eagerly agreed, saying she'd be home in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes were the longest in my life. I paced the living room, holding the burner phone in my palm like a lifeline, or even a ticking time bomb. When I heard her car approaching, my heart raced. This was it. It's now or never. The confrontation I had both dreaded and hoped for. Mehgan went in and looked. She looked like hell, to be honest. Her eyes were red and puffy, and her hair was in disorder. For a brief moment, I felt pity. When I discovered why we were in this situation, my pity went to ash. "Jake, she began, but I cut her off. "How long?" I questioned, my voice barely above a whisper. She blinked, confused. "What? How? Long?" I repeated, each syllable filled with anger. I held up the burner phone. "How long have you been screwing around behind my back?" Her face had lost its color. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then opened it again. There was no sound coming out. "Answer me!" I shouted, prompting her to retreat. 6 months, she finally murmured, her eyes fixed on the earth. 6 months, half a year of deception and betrayal. I felt as if I had been hit in the stomach. "Who is he?" I demanded. She paused before responding. "His name is Brad. He's a client at work." Of course, she'd been spending a lot of time with an unknown client. The reason for all those late nights and unexpected business trips. Everything became clear now. "Do you love him?" I couldn't stop myself from asking the question. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Mehgan's eyes were full of tears. I do not know. It is complicated." I laughed bitterly. "Complicated? You're fucking another man behind my back and all you say is complicated?" She flinched again, but I didn't mind. The rage that had been building within me had finally boiled over. "Was I not good enough for you?" I yelled. "Have you become bored with our lives? Or was it simply too appealing to resist when some rich jerk started giving you attention?" "It's not like that," she responded softly. "So, Mehgan, what's it like? Please enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it appears that you gave up 10 years of marriage for a cheap thrill." She started crying hard, with heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Part of me wanted to console her, to wrap her in my arms like I had so many times before. But that aspect was quickly overshadowed by the roar of deceit in my ears. "I'm sorry," she said, sobbing. "I am deeply sorry. I never intended for this to happen." "But it did happen," I replied with a cold tone. "And now we have to deal with the consequences." She nodded and dried her tears. What do you want to do?" What did I want to do? Christ, I had no idea. A part of me wanted to throw her out and never see her face again. Another part, the part that still loved her despite everything, wanted to see if things could work out. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again after this." She nodded again, saddened. "I understand. I will do whatever it takes to make things right. If you want me to leave my job, I will. If you want me to stop any communication with Brad, consider it done. Just don't give up on us." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one I'd married 10 years before. I assumed I knew it better than anyone else in the world. "Why?" I questioned, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do it?" She took a deep breath and appeared to collect her thoughts. I felt invisible, as if I was simply going through the motions. Work was stressful, we were both quite busy. Brad made me feel seen, appreciated. And I didn't? The words came out sharper than I intended. She flinched. "You did, but it was different. New. Exciting." "So you threw away our marriage for a cheap thrill," I said plainly. "No," she said. "It wasn't like that. I love you, Jake. I've always adored you. A terrible, unforgivable mistake." I laughed bitterly. "It is a mistake not to buy milk at the shop. This is a decision, a set of choices. Every time you met with him, every text you sent, every lie you told me, they were all possibilities." She did not have an explanation for this. She simply stood there, tears streaming down her cheeks. I sighed, suddenly feeling quite tired. "I need time," I stated. "It is time to reflect and assimilate everything. I can't look at you right now without envisioning yourself with him." She nodded, looking heartbroken. "I understand. Should I go to reside with my sister?" Part of me wanted to say yes and keep the place to myself. But another half, the side that still loved her despite everything, couldn't bear the thought of her leaving. "No," I said finally. "I shall go. I need some space anyway." "Where will you go?" she asked, looking anxious. I shrugged. "Tom's, maybe, or go back to the campsite. I don't know. I just know I can't be here right now." She nodded again, appearing bewildered. "Will you call me?" "Let me know if you're fine." I did not respond. I grabbed my keys and moved toward the door. "Jake?" she called after me. I came to a standstill with my hand on the doorknob. "I am sincerely sorry. I know it won't change anything, but I am." I returned my sight to her, the woman I'd adored for years. This woman had ripped my heart into a million pieces. "Yeah," I said gently. "Me too." I walked away, closing the door behind me. As I hopped into my truck, I felt an unexpected mix of emotions. Yes, I feel angry, unhappy, and betrayed. But also relief. I felt relieved that the truth had finally been revealed. I was relieved that I wouldn't have to pretend everything was perfect anymore. As I drove away from the house, Mehgan, and the life we'd built together, I had no idea what the future held. I only knew that things would never be the same again. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. The following few weeks were a jumble of pain, bewilderment, and sleepless nights. I ended up staying at Tom's house, sleeping on his terrible couch and attempting to put my life back together. Tom was a blessing at this time. He listened without passing judgment, kept me from drinking myself to oblivion, and even covered for me at work when I couldn't face the day. Mehgan called and texted often. Initially, I ignored her. Then, after the initial shock and indignation subsided, I began to respond. Short, terse messages. "I'm fine. No, I'm not ready to talk. I need more time. But as the days passed into weeks, I realized I couldn't avoid her forever. We shared a life, a home, and finances. Despite everything, a part of me still loved her, still wanted to know why she'd done what she did. So, around a month after that fateful day, I decided to meet her for coffee. You know, neutral ground. I arrived first, ordered a black coffee, and waited. When she walked in, my heart skipped a little. Despite everything, she still had that influence on me. It made me angry all over again. "Hi, Jake," she whispered quietly, sliding onto the seat across from mine. "Thanks for meeting me." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. She appeared different. Thinner, perhaps. Definitely more weary. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't conceal. "How are you?" she said, her tone cautious. I laughed harshly, making her flinch. "How am I?" "Seriously, Mehgan, are you going with that?" She gazed down at her hands. "I apologize. I'm not sure how to do this." "Yeah, so that makes two of us," I murmured. We sat there in awkward quiet for a few moments. Then, taking a big breath, I posed the question that had been bothering me for weeks. "Why, Mehgan? Why wasn't I enough?" Her eyes flooded with tears. "Oh, Jake, it was never a question of you not being enough. You were, and are, more than enough. That was me. I was the one who didn't have enough." I frowned, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She groaned and ran a hand over her hair. "I've always felt as though I was living in your shadow. You are very good. So kind, honest, and diligent. Everyone adores you. And me? I'm just the pretty face who was fortunate enough to marry you." I glanced at her, perplexed. "Is that truly how you see yourself? How do you see us?" She nodded but did not meet my gaze. "Brad made me feel unique, important, as if I was more than just your wife." "And I didn't make you feel that way?" I inquired, my tone barely above a whisper. "You did," she replied swiftly. "You do. But I don't know. It was different with Brad. New. Exciting." I felt like I had been hit in the stomach. "So our life together, our marriage, it wasn't exciting enough for you?" She shook her head furiously. "No, it was not what I intended. I just got caught up in the attention and flattery. Before I realized it, things had gotten too far." "Things don't just go too far, Mehgan," I said, my voice firm. "You made a choice. There are multiple options. Every time you met with him, every lie you told me, they were all options." She nodded, tears running down her cheeks now. "I understand. And I'll live with the consequences of those decisions for the rest of my life. I damaged everything, didn't I? I didn't respond, couldn't respond, because the truth was that I didn't know. Has she damaged everything? Or was there anything left to salvage?" "What about Brad?" I inquired, hating how his name tasted in my mouth. She shivered at the mention of his name. "It is over. It's completely over. I ended it the same day you found out." "I haven't spoken to him since. What if I hadn't caught you? Is it still over?" She paused, and in that moment I had my response. "Right," I responded, pulling away from the table. "I think we're done here." "Jake, please wait," she said, grabbing for my hand. I drew away. "Please, I realize I've made a huge mistake, but I do adore you. I have always adored you. Can't we attempt to figure this out?" I stared at her, the woman I had adored for so long. This woman had broken my heart, and I realized I had no retort for her. "I don't know, Mehgan," I admitted ultimately. "I'm not sure if I can ever trust you again." "And without faith, what do we have?" She nodded, new tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I simply hope you'll forgive me someday, even if you can't forget." I rose up, suddenly fatigued. "Yes, well, do not hold your breath. When I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt like I was leaving more than just Mehgan behind. I was leaving behind the life I imagined we'd have and the future we'd planned together. It hurt like hell, but it also felt liberating in a way. Over the next 3 months, Mehgan and I attempted counseling. We spoke, sobbed, and yelled. We went over every detail of our relationship, attempting to figure out where things went wrong. She pledged that it would never happen again, that she would do whatever it takes to regain my faith. A part of me wanted to believe her. I wanted to forgive, forget, and go back to how things were. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her beside him. Every time she was late getting home from work, I wondered if she was with him again. The trust had been destroyed, and I wasn't sure it could ever be totally restored. Finally, we decided to separate. There is no divorce yet. However, we needed time apart to figure out what we truly desired, whether our marriage was worth salvaging. It has been 6 months now, 6 months of living independently, rediscovering who I am outside of being Mehgan's husband. It has not been easy. Some days I feel as if I can't breathe because I miss her so terribly. Some days all I want to do is phone her and tell her to come home. But there are those days when I feel fine, when I can envision a future for myself that does not involve her. It's both scary and exhilarating. Mehgan and I are still talking. We're attempting to become friends, or at least friendly. It's awkward and difficult, but we are working on it. For the sake of our common lives, if nothing else. She's currently in therapy, addressing her own difficulties. I'm trying to figure out why she did what she did, and why she was willing to sacrifice everything for a fling. I hope she finds the answers. I really do. As for me, I am taking it one day at a time, trying to reconstruct my life and sense of self. It is not easy, but I'm getting there. I'm not sure what the future holds, whether Mehgan and I will eventually reconcile or part ways. All I know is that I am no longer the same person I was before everything happened. And perhaps that isn't such a horrible thing after all.